Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the Haydn Symphony Crusade. And we're up to Symphony number 80 in D minor. This is one of Haydn's most original and insane symphonies. It's amazing. It's one of my personal favorites, too. But it's absolutely nuts in the best possible way. It has a richness of expression that is absolutely incomparable, and nobody in the entire symphonic universe, before or since, has been able to achieve what I think Haydn manages to do in this symphony in terms of expressive variety and point. Every movement in this symphony has its little what should I say, personality, its character. And the whole symphony is unified by an overarching concept. That overarching concept is the contrast of opposites. In each movement, it's done in a different way. In the finale, it's rhythm. In the third movement, it's unison melody versus two-part counterpoint or harmony. In the second movement, it's major versus minor. In the first movement, well, that's the wackiest of all and the most amazing, because we're dealing with sonata form, so we're dealing with conflict and character. And the characters are, well, Faustian striving for transcendence, sort of, and what I can only call insolence. It's the first time I've ever heard a piece of music where I listened to a tune and said, that's insolent. And it is. And the conflict that it generates is absolutely amazing. It's an expressive polarity that no one had attempted before. And people still don't understand it. Haydn's reputation, for example, in North Germany was as a clown. They took him without any particular seriousness, and thought that, his music was just light and frivolous. C.P.E. Bach knew differently. He admired Haydn and told Haydn so, because his music was similar, and Haydn had learned a lot from him in terms of that sort of dialectic, this contrast between wildly opposing expressive characters. And that's what we're going to hear in this symphony. It's just an unbelievably amazing piece. So we want to get right to it, I think, because I've got like 13 musical examples. We're going to listen to most of it over the course of this chat, because there's just so much to talk about, and it's so fabulously rich and interesting. Now, the first movement, like I said, it's in D minor, and people have come down on Haydn for writing minor keys that aren't terribly minorish. They're not tragic. But tragedy isn't his point here. And quite frankly, tragedy, or at least darkness or unhappiness or elegiacness or whatever you want to call it, is the easiest thing to do in the world in music. You just pick a minor key and hang on to it. And if you write distinctive melodic material and you stay in your minor key, it's going to sound pathetic. It's going to sound sad. It's going to sound whatever. The longer you hang out, the sadder it gets. Until finally, it gets so sad that some people say, it's tragic. But that's not what Haydn's doing. Haydn is interested in evolving character. And these things, they don't stick with one simple emotion for great lengths of time. They evolve, they change, things happen. And we wind up with a melange, a mix, a whole range of characterization, usually generated by the same simple ideas. And that happens here. But even more happens here. I mean, it's okay, let me stop talking. Let me play you Insolence. You ready? Listen to this tune. This is Insolence. Yeah, that was Adam Fischer with the Austro-Hungarian Haydn Orchestra on Nimbus / Brilliant Classics, depending on who it's licensed to. It's a very good performance. Here's the deal. Why is that insolent? Well, you'll find out why it's insolent when we listen to the entire exposition. But that is the second subject of the symphony. And it has some rather remarkable things about it. One of the things is that it's self-evidently comic. Yap, yap, ooh. With its pizzicato accompaniment, its barrel organ music, squeeze box like a little accordion. But there's something very strange about that tune. Did you notice? It's too short. It's missing a bar at the end. That jan jan da 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 dun dun da da dun. You want to hear something else, don't you? If it were a symmetrical tune, it would have 2 4-bar phrases. Well, this has a 4 and a 3 because it's in 3/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Let's listen to it again. Well, I listen to it again. Let me hum it to you. I know you don't want me to sing, but it's okay. I'm going to do the existing version. Da 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 da. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. I can't count to 4. That's 4. Then it's 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3. It stops. If it were a simple balanced phrase, it would be jan jan da 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 dum bum ba da dum dun da da dum yan dun da 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 dum bum ba da dum dun dun dum, or something like that. Da da dum bum ba da dum, or da da dum ba da da dum. Anything you want. It needs an extra bar to balance out the phrase. Well, it's missing it, and because it pulls up short and is missing a bar, it's funny. I mean, it sounds off kilter and slightly out of whack. And of course, that's Haydn's point. It's one of the things that makes it insolent. But what makes it insolent is its place within the entire exposition. So the symphony, the first movement of the symphony is nominally in sonata form. That was the second subject. But, most sonata form movements that have second subjects in Haydn or anywhere else, they play the second subject. And then there's like a little coda. There's a wrap-up, a cadence theme, something that brings the exposition to a tidy close. Well, this doesn't. It just stops, and there's nothing afterwards. So that in itself is very, very unusual. It's also very short. Everything that comes before, like a minute and a bit of music, is first subject. Something else entirely is going on before you get to the second subject. And because it's in D minor, it begins very Sturm und Drangish. In fact, Haydn is making an allusion at the opening of the symphony. Bum, 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 bum. That thing. The opening, it's in the bass with string tremolos on top. It's all very tense and anguished. He's making an allusion to the Dance of the Furies by Gluck, which was originally part of his ballet Don Juan and then his opera Orfeo and Eurydice. Now, I was desperately trying to find an example that I could play you that I had permission to use, and I couldn't, so I apologize for that. But the Dance of the Furies, which was also used in Boccherini's symphony, nicknamed The House of the Devil, for that reason as well. He takes the whole piece by Gluck and sort of adjusts it and inserts it in the finale of his symphony. But the theme of that Dance of the Furies is dum bum 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 da 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 da. That's Haydn. They're so close that I get them mixed up. Dum bum 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 ba dum ba da dum da da. That's Gluck. Okay? I mean, they're very, very similar. And Haydn's audiences would have known that. Haydn even produced Orpheus for the Esterhazy private opera company. So it would have been something that they knew about. And that's clearly what Haydn is alluding to. But it doesn't stay anxious and aggrieved as long as the Gluck does. It immediately switches off to the major key, and there's this conflict between striving and it's a climbing towards the light. That's what the exposition, or most of the exposition, is. The first subject of it. There's no the difference between like the opening theme and motion music and all of that stuff. You just forget about it. It's just a series of ideas that gradually achieve major key triumph. And having achieved that major key triumph, it comes to a, victorious stop, going, aha, here we are. And then we hear insolence. So I want to play you the entire exposition now so you can see what Haydn is doing. This gradual transition from angst to victory, and it's all just it's all just ridiculed at the end of the exposition. So here is the exposition. Now, what is that? What happens? I'm not usually a fan of narrative, of making up a story or something that goes with the music, but this is one of those cases where what Haydn is doing has such programmatic exactitude that you really can sort of think up a story that goes with it. Let's say two people are in a race, and the race is to get to the top story of a large multi-story building and get to the roof to win a prize, or one should beat the other. They achieve victory, something like that, right? So the first character is running up the stairs. There's like 20 stories. They're running up, and it's exhausting. And they glimpse victory, and they're pushing and shoving. And as they get closer, victory becomes obvious. The music changes to a major key. It's in sight. They burst into the light, and ta-da! They're there. And then there's the other schlub they're racing against. He took the elevator. That's what happened. So he's been there all along, and he's like, hi, you moron, I took the elevator. It's like the woman in the Boston Marathon, no, the New York Marathon, who took the subway and cheated, to get there. That's why it's insolent, because Haydn is doing this whole struggle and striving and turmoil and then achieves final victory. It works its way up there. And then you've got, hi, I've already been here. I've been here all along. Too bad. Really very, very funny. I mean, what he does. But that's what this music does. It's that kind of a thing. So that's the exposition. Now, having achieved that in the exposition, these two characters are going to sort of duke it out, and the insolent character almost never changes. It's only at the very end of the development section. The development section is hilarious. Haydn's use of silence. You don't know what's going to happen next is absolutely incredible in this development section. And our insolent character keeps coming back in different keys, unchanged in terms of his character, while the strife music keeps interrupting and struggling and trying to, make some kind of larger point, none of which goes anywhere. So I'm going to play you now the development section, and I have to play the end of the exposition because you've got to be able to catch the pauses, the way Haydn plays tricks on us, and the way he makes this little insolent tune always more irritating, until the last time you hear it, it seems to want to give up. It seems to want to give up. Here's the development section. Now, the development section ends with, as you heard, a big workup of the opening music of the symphony, the strife and struggle music. And that comes to a pause. It comes to a straight pause, and instead of insolence again, Haydn gives us immediately the music that had switched to the major key, the major key in the first movement. So it all sounds like it's going splendidly at that point. Insolence has been banished, or so it seems. So again, I'm going to play you the end of the development and the beginning of the recapitulation. Now notice at the beginning of the recapitulation that because it's featured, the opening of the symphony is featured so strongly in the development, Haydn just leaves it out. At the recap, he can start with the bit that began in the major key, the more hopeful and victorious part. He starts there, so it sounds very much more positive than it did initially. Here we have the end of the development, the beginning of the recapitulation. But no, just when we thought that victory had been won and insolence and shallowness and tawdriness and obnoxiousness had been completely banished, there it is, just as it always had been, to wrap up the movement with a big guffaw, a giant laugh. And one of the most interesting things about this movement, actually, is that it's one of the very first movements that Haydn wrote in a symphony that wasn't an overture or something else, that has no second half repeat. The end is the end. Normally, he would go back to the beginning of the development again and play the whole thing through again, but not here. A good joke is only good once. I mean, Haydn understood that. And so the ending is really the ending. He doesn't want to go back and do it all over again. He's made his point. And the point is that insolence is victorious ultimately over the hero who sounds somewhat comical and blustering and as a result of that. And that's the first movement. And it's simply amazing. It really is. First time I heard it, I was in stitches the whole time. And, the more I listen to it, the more wonderful it becomes, because you get the subtleties of how Haydn emphasizes the overall expressive point. So that's the first movement. And the contrast between, noble striving and clowning is the whole point of the thing. whole point of the movement. Now, the second movement has a lovely, lovely opening theme, but you'll notice that it's liberally spiked with some grace notes from our insolent theme. Remember? Be-dum, be-dum, ba-da-da-dum, ba. Well, the slow movement theme has a be-dum, be-dum, be-dum there too, and it immediately makes you think, oh, God! It's coming back. It's back. It's not. It's just a little illusion to give you a zotz, a little twinge. But this movement is in sonata form with a repeated exposition, a beautiful range of material, gorgeous range of subjects, loud and soft and lyrical and abrupt, and it's just wonderfully contrasted. But here, the contrast is simply major versus minor, because what Haydn does in this movement is he plays the whole exposition, which is basically lyrical, happy, passionate, but in a positive sort of way. Then the development section is quite simply virtually the entire exposition, not all of it, but most of it in a minor key. It's all the same music, just turned into a minor key, which gives it a very pathetic and sometimes, turbulent quality that recalls the more angst-filled moments of the first movement. So I'm going to play you a bit of the exposition with a pause, followed by a bit of the development, which is the same music, only recast in a minor key. And you'll hear exactly what Haydn does. Then the recapitulation returns to the major key, and it all ends very beautifully, and it works out just fine. But the point is that it's the same material, only in contrasted keys, to give a totally different expressive slant on the tunes of the movement. And here it is. Lovely stuff, absolutely lovely stuff, and wonderfully, darkly pathetic when it, hits the minor key central development section. The recapitulation sort of combines little elements of both, but the idea behind this movement, the contrast, is just that. It's that major versus minor, light versus darkness, similar to the first subject of the first movement, not the insolent theme. So then we come to the minuet. Now the minuet is back in D minor. And this is a fascinating minuet, actually. It's kind of grim. And Haydn was pretty good, actually, at writing grim minuets. He did some really, really fine ones. And it's a very austere piece in mostly two-part counterpoint. Dun 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 dun, dun, and listen to the bass line with an independent bass line and then a melody on top. It's in two parts, rather severe. And here it is. Here is the Minuette. Quite short, by the way, as you noticed, but the trio section, oh, this is interesting. The trio section is a Gregorian chant, sort of. It's close to Gregorian chant that Haydn used previously in like La Passione symphony and things like that. But the theme is a one-note theme, more or less. Yeah, da 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 da. That's the theme. It's as different from the Minuette as it's possible to be. It's a single line, mostly a single note. The second half has a rising phrase before returning to the beginning. It's very interesting, actually, because this Minuette and trio, although tiny in size, is very similar conceptually to the scherzo of Sibelius' Second Symphony, because you've got, first of all, it's prestissimo. You've got this contrapuntal, busy stuff in the strings. It's doing all that stuff. And then the trio section is an oboe solo, rather similar to Haydn's, with 9 repeated notes. Remember? Yeah, da 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 da. That's the Sibelius. And there's no evidence that he particularly knew Haydn's 80th Symphony, but conceptually they're very similar, and the idea is the same. It's this contrast between busy contrapuntal activity and complete, total simplicity to the point where the melody itself is a single note and a single line. So that's the Minuette and trio. Now, the finale. Oh my gosh, the finale. The finale is the mirror image of the first movement. See, the first movement had the struggly part, which is also sort of the normal part at the beginning, and then the insolent, crazy part at the end. Well, this does the opposite. This has the wacky stuff at the beginning, and the second subject is a beautifully balanced, simple, rhythmically normal melody. So the opening is, the concept here is syncopated versus normal rhythm. The first theme is incredibly syncopated. It just starts with 3 notes going da, 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 and it's okay, what are those? Well, but they're not on the beat, because it's in 2/4, I think. It's just something, so it's da, 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 da. It's very hard to figure out where the beat is. You could hear it immediately. Haydn wants it to sound really out of joint. And that syncopated rhythm with the like that sort of thing is permeates the whole first subject. But the second subject, well, here it is. It's a lovely oboe tune. You see? It feels so good. It's just such a relief when it comes. And it's normalcy and happiness after all of the wackiness that's come before. So let me play you the whole exposition so you hear how it works out. Here it is. Wonderful piece. Again, it's a piece of music like no one else at the time could have written. And remember, Haydn wrote these three symphonies, 79, 80, and 81, for performances in Vienna in 1785. I mean, they were composed for the Esterházy Orchestra, of course, but these were also, in a way, it was almost a public premiere, a reveal of everything he'd learned, in all those years sitting in Esterházy. And so it's really an extraordinary debut in a way. It's a level of sophistication and compositional craft and expressive range that nobody else was doing at the time, except for Mozart, of course, because the mid-1780s were when his Da Ponte operas and things were starting, and he was going like gangbusters at that point, and Haydn knew it too. They were best friends, let's not forget. So anyway, the development section now, I mean, it's also in sonata form. It has an exposition with repeat. The development section occurs in two waves, and each wave begins with the syncopated stuff, and the normal stuff, da 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 da. Just remember that idea. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, da 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 da. That idea is pitted against the syncopated craziness, the normalcy of rhythm against the irregular rhythm. And so wave number one starts like the opening of the movement, and it has this sort of battle, and the second subject comes in, and then it stops. And here is wave number one. Now, wave number two does it again. You'll see, by the way, that this is similar to what we heard in the first movement development section. Not just in the strange range of keys, one following the other, but the fact that there are these pauses, and then it goes back to the unusual theme. The first movement, it was the insolent second subject. Here, it's the crazy first subject, but the concept is somewhat similar. So wave number two is another attempt of the syncopated thing and the normal rhythmic thing to somehow battle it out. Well, that doesn't get very far, does it? And so we finally get to the last attempt. And in the last attempt, finally, the syncopated rhythm starts to finally, iron out the wrinkles, the kinks, and the second subject comes sailing in the way it normally does, leading to a coda in which rhythmic sanity and sanity in general, given the tenor of this entire symphony, returns once and for all. And listen to the last three notes carefully. Yeah, now that ending, John, 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 three notes repeated, that became Haydn's characteristic ending. From here on in, he's going to use it a lot, especially in the London symphonies. That is one of the ways we know that Haydn is the composer, just that three-note, chung, 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 which nobody else was using, which is rather interesting. But beyond that, what you don't hear and what you don't know is that this movement, because no performance ever does it that I'm aware of, this performance has a second half repeat. It really does. And you need to take it, because if you look at the score, if you look at the actual ending, it goes dun 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 dun, chant chant chant. That's not the end. There's another bar and a half after that of silence that Haydn notates. And so dun dun dun, bum bum bum, bum bum bum. It would go back. Why does Haydn want to go back? Well, because remember the opening. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But it's a syncopated 3. The final chords, chan, 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 are not syncopated. They reestablish a nice, firm, normal rhythm. So Haydn goes back to the syncopated version, and we realize that what he's done at the very end is reassert even more strongly the normalcy of a regular rhythm. And you hear that more clearly, more, I think, definitively, if you actually take the repeat. And if you do it with exactly the time scale, with the pause at the end that Haydn actually indicated. And that way, when you finally get to the last three notes, again, the second time, the end is really the end. You may expect it to go back, but it doesn't. It stops. And sanity has reasserted itself. And it's just one of those incredibly subtle touches that, among many with Haydn, that we don't get to hear, because Haydn was, like I said, one of the few composers of his time who made second half repeats matter. He wrote the music knowing that they were there, and he wanted to do something with it. He didn't want it to just be lazy, just a thing to make it longer. He wanted there to be a point. And in this symphony, there is a point. And unfortunately, we almost never get to hear it. I mean, we almost never get to hear the whole symphony. I actually saw it once. One time, Rostropovich conducted it, believe it or not, with the National Symphony in Carnegie Hall. And it was fabulous. And people laughed in the right places. And everybody went away thinking, gee, that was great. Why don't we ever hear that? It's a very good question, isn't it? But I hope that this little talk with all these little examples has given you a sense of just what an amazing work this is, just how rich it is in expression and how unconventional in its means and methods, and a totally original work of genius, and an extraordinary piece. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.